Welcome to Third Floor Views, a production of Chesapeake Family Life, where we talk about health, education, and living with kids. I'm your host, Janet Jefferson. Today, we're talking about adaptive sports and the upcoming Paralympics starting August 24th. Joining us is Gwena and Gerry Herman, and they started the Bennett Institute for physically challenged sports, athletes, and it's a sports program at Kennedy Krieger. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
To our viewers, please feel free to submit any questions or comments that you might have in the comment section, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Let's get started. So first, I'd love to just hear about the Bennett Institute and your role there, and just a little bit of the ins and outs.
Well, it was established in 1989. It was the idea of Dr. Charles Silberstein to have a program for physically challenged athletes in this region. So we came down and we surveyed the region and really realized there was a need for a program like ours. Initially, we kind of copied a program that we ran in Massachusetts, and we came down and we started at age 5 initially. But as we moved on, we went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We went down to 20 months, and that part of our program kind of serves as called motor development. It kind of serves as the basis for future development of the athletes. Then we move on to recreational level sports, where we expose athletes to as many sports as possible so that they can make choices about what they want to pursue and what they maybe become more serious at. And then finally, there's an athletic component of our program where they compete regionally, local, national, internationally. And again, they make decisions on which sports they're going to pursue. We've always espoused that they should play as many sports as possible for as long as possible. And even our Paralympic level athletes have most often hung on to multiple sports through high school, versus like a lot of programs, a lot of sports, able-bodied, disabled now. As soon as they see a spark of skill, they want you to focus on one sport, which we just don't believe in. The other thing, which is great for our program, is we share it with Kennedy Krieger, but it's really a facility that's we consider to be ours. We have a gym, we have a weight room, we have a pool, and we have an outdoor facility. So that really cuts down on any administrative hassles that you have when you're trying to do a community-based program that you have to share with other programs, and that really gives us the fluidity to do a lot more programs, a lot more opportunities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why do you recommend that students continue with multiple sports, even if they've sort of found their calling?
Well, there's two reasons. One of them is the socialization. Sadly, what happens with like, for example, in sled hockey, if you make the high-level team in the United States, high-level junior team, then you get kicked out of junior hockey. So now you go from playing with other 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and now you're playing with 20-year-olds. So the socialization is totally different. And we really, we say that, you only get to go to high school once, you're only in 8th grade once. So you want to stay with your friends and get that socialization. For example, when Tatiana went to the Paralympics when she was 15 years old, she was lost. I mean, she was in with 30-year-olds, 25-year-olds. Her family and us were there to support her and give her kind of a network, but she probably spent just as much time out of the village as she spent in the village. And it just also develops different muscle groups, gives you different awareness, whether it's, for example, if you play basketball, you might get concepts that you can then transfer to hockey, and doing different training type systems. At one point, someone suggested one of our athletes drop basketball and just focus on track. And then one of the top athletes in the world, Joshua George, who we also came from our program, said, I think basketball is the best thing for track because it really teaches you, it really keeps your fast twitch muscles going. So there's a lot of crossover, and it's transferred to the able-bodied sports world, and I think still in the disabled world, where college coaches now oftentimes are shying away from somebody that started focusing on whatever sport it was when they're age 5, because they're so limited in their abilities.
I think the other big thing is that, they're still kids, and they just need the opportunity to have fun and play and be exposed to a lot of different activities.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I can see, I agree that you hear a lot more about cross training, the importance of it, and the way that you laid it out. It makes so much sense that you are getting other perspectives and working on other muscle groups, and that will really make you a stronger athlete. Um, how long are kids typically with you in your program? Do they normally start when they're really little and then sort of stay the whole length, or do you often see like a big surge come elementary school? What is your sort of typical journey for a kid once they join the program?
It really varies from kid to kid. It really just comes down to when a parent finds out about our program. Like I said, sometimes you get a kid that starts at age 2, sometimes you get a kid that starts at 10, 12, and then at that point, the parent's actually pretty frustrated that they didn't find us until they were 10 or 12.
Hmm.
We love to get them as early as possible. I mean, one of our program mottos is to teach children they can before somebody tells them that they can't.
Hmm.
And then the earlier you can do that in life, obviously, the better it is for the child and for the families. A lot of times when a family has a child who's disabled, they give it a lot of negative information. It's like, your child's not going to be able to do this. Your child's not going to be able to do that. Um, and for whatever reason, it's just the way it is. So they come to the Bennett and then they see, we're like, oh no, your child can do this. No, they can do this. It might be in a different fashion or a different way, but they can do things. There's lots of things that kids with disabilities can do, and we're a good environment for that. And it just helps educate the families and then the kids as well.
Mhm.
So when they do come into the program, for the most part, most kids stay until they graduate out of high school.
Mm,
Uh,
mhm.
we are getting to the point where we have several kids that have graduated out, and then their recreation and their physical activity is stopped. So we do now have an adult sled hockey team and an adult wheelchair basketball team to try to accommodate some of those kids, because they still need to be active and they also still need the socialization, really.
Mhm. Definitely, definitely. I mean, I was a college athlete, and once that ended, once that sort of structured organization ended, it sort of fell wayside. I think that's really common for a lot of people, and to have that structure in place is a big part. So the fact that you're able to start to offer that for those who have sort of aged out of the program, it makes so much sense. So how do people get involved? You said that often, parents are like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew about this earlier. Once someone knows about the program and they're interested in joining, what's the best way for them to actually get involved?
Basically, they just need to, when they find out about us, it's just getting in touch with us. We kind of do get some general information about the child, and then usually ask them to come in for like a short interview,
Mhm.
just to kind of show them the facility, and then we get to see the child at the same time. Even just seeing them walk through the door or wheel through the door, you can evaluate a kid quickly on what he or she might be able to do and what program might be best fit their needs. Is really
Mhm.
what it comes down to. Basically, our program is for kids with diagnosed physical disabilities, but for the most part, most of the kids are cognitively um, not impaired at all. I mean, some have some learning disabilities and things like that, but they're mainstreamed into the regular school environment. So the fun thing is, like, a lot of kids come into the gym for the first time, and it's like there are other kids in the world just like me,
Right.
because they see that in their school. They're the only disabled child in their whole school environment.
Yeah.
Um, so again, it's like the parents just get in touch with us. They come in, see the facility, and we just determine what program might be best fit the kids' needs.
That's great. Can we talk a little bit about the upcoming games, the Paralympics? So they start August 24th and then go through September 5th. And then you have 4 athletes that were in your program that you worked with. Could you just talk about them and who they are and what they're competing in?
Well, it kind of goes back to Joshua George, who's the athlete that was just added. He was one of our first Paralympians way back when. I don't know how many 4 cycles ago,
Right.
but he was kind of the one that kind of kick-started some of the other aspects of the program.
Mm.
Tatiana, when she was younger, she had tremendous natural ability, but she didn't really have a serious training program. And Josh took her under his wing and kind of woke her up, and then eventually she started beating him. But
They actually both participated in 2004 in the Paralympics together, even though Josh was a few years older. He was already in the college scene, and Tatiana was still in high school, obviously.
Incredible.
So then Tatiana was next, and she was always, I mean, you knew she was going to be great. And it's just a matter of what she wanted to do. I mean, she probably couldn't have been, but she was beating everyone in swimming just because she could move her arms faster than everybody else. We used to call her the water killer, and she could just make her arms go, and she was like a cartoon, you know. And then other sports like hockey and basketball, she wasn't a great shooter, but she could cover 3 people by herself because she was so fast, you know. So, and then she just kind of moved along, and the majority of our athletes who have taken this track go from the Bennett to the University of Illinois, where then they really make the next phase of training in their life, you know.
So why the University of Illinois?
It's the best wheelchair program in the world. I mean, they have the technology through some additional funding that Tatiana got, I believe, from Exxon. They have a scientific facility and the ability to train multiple athletes simultaneously with very high level equipment. For example, in the past, when you worked on a treadmill, a wheelchair treadmill, I'll call a roller, the technology back in the day was you put a telephone book on it to give it resistance. And now they have computer generated hills and et cetera to make their training a much more higher level. And they can also do, you know, VO2 max, et cetera. So being in that environment, also, it has a history of attracting the top athletes around the world. So you may be training with other Paralympians from other countries. Oftentimes, to reach your potential, you need to have that person near you or close in ability. Oftentimes, when they don't have it at the University of Illinois, they'll use a hand cycle, and the person will chase the hand cycle. Or I was just reading an article about earlier training where they did overspeed training using a car. So they would chase a car, you know, and so they could get the higher level of speed. But now when they go, they have, you know, Daniel, Tatiana, Josh, and they can train in a pack, and it gives you that ability to train at a very, very high level.
So we have Tatiana, Josh, Daniel, and then who's the fourth? Ryan, right?
Yeah, Ryan's a wheelchair basketball player, and he's always been self-motivated, and started with us at the prep level, which is 13 and under. I believe he won a national championship at that level. And he just always had the desire and the will to go forward and train. So it took him a while to get to the Paralympics, but he's finally there. And oftentimes the difference between a Paralympian and a regular athlete is people like Ryan would be shooting 2-3 hours a day and doing physical training to improve themselves versus, you know, other athletes, once practice was over, there's no outside of structured practice. So oftentimes that's the difference between a Paralympian and a regular athlete, that they just do this extra training and extra motivation to make sure they're doing all they can to be successful.
That's incredible.
It wasn't an easy road for Ryan. I mean, he didn't make the Paralympic team, I mean, his first couple of times out. But he had that desire, and he had that drive to just keep pushing and keep pushing. And then he finally made it this go around. So it's really exciting for him.
That is exciting. So we've got those four: Tatiana, Daniel, Ryan, and Josh to look at. Who else should we be watching in the upcoming games? And sort of what are you most excited about? Are there certain sports that you in particular are drawn to? Or are you excited about any particular individual competitions or competitors that are going to be up against each other?
I mean, it's just obviously with the sports that our athletes are in are going to be the most exciting for us. You always want to see kids that you know or have the opportunity to work with. But there are lots and lots of amazing athletes out there within all the sports environments. Just like the Olympics, I mean, the Paralympics have all great athletes. So any sport would be amazing to watch. I think for somebody that doesn't have any background in disabled sports, to be able to watch the Paralympics and some of the more unique things like the no-armed archer, who is like, I mean, medals in the Paralympics, and he does archery with his feet. Some of the other exciting things that I've always enjoyed are the visually impaired long jumpers. I mean, so they can't see the the track that they're running down and landing in the pit, and they're just doing it all by listening to their coach give them the verbal cues. The amputee high jumpers. I mean, they all have their own exciting stories. I mean, they just realize that they're athletes, and they've worked so hard to get to where they're going to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you talked a little bit about some of the differences between an Olympian versus a Paralympian, and what does it mean in terms of training? What are some unique challenges that Paralympians face that might be different than your typical Olympian? And what you mentioned that Ryan, that his mindset was like, I've got to be able to do this. I've got to figure it out. And that he had all of this drive and motivation. What do you feel like you see in your athletes that might be different in someone that was shooting for the Olympics?
Well, sometimes it's access to facilities. I mean, the world is 100% better than when we started. I think, when we started here 30 years ago, if you were in a wheelchair and you went to the Y, they probably wouldn't let you shoot, but more and more facilities are open now and actually provide training and opportunity. One of the real big hurdles that we've been facing the last decade, I guess now, is access to a track. We don't have, that's one thing that we're missing that would make our program complete. But luckily in our hometown community, which is 30 miles from our facility, it's an open policy, and the open policy allows us to bring our athletes on the track and train. A lot of other facilities don't allow wheelchairs on the track. So things like that, those little barriers that make it go. And also too, sometimes you need to have, I was a sprinter in college, and basically after college, you stop because there's no other sprinters to train with. So if you can get a team or athletes you can train with, that makes a big difference in your ability, because you have to have extreme mental ability to train by yourself on a roller. It's super difficult. So those are some of the things: access to facilities and training methods. And the other big thing, which as you climb the ladder, oftentimes it just gets better, and there's many organizations now that provide equipment. Having the simple thing between having a 25-pound racing chair versus a 15-pound racing chair is going to make you that much better. One of the things that we're really proud of is all of our athletes donate their used equipment back to our program. Tatiana, Daniel, Josh, and Ryan have all donated used equipment back. And that makes a tremendous difference to the future athletes. For example, one of our athletes this summer, David Ramos, he got access to a carbon graphite racing chair, which there's no way that our program can afford to buy a $7,000 racing chair. But Daniel donated it to the program, and he benefited. And one of the things that's great about those donations is Josh probably donated a chair 15 years ago, and it's still in the program, and it's went through. Daniel used it, and then future athletes are using it, and it's going to be around as long as it lasts.
Like I said, equipment is like a big barrier for a lot of athletes. Obviously, you want to just try a new sport out, but for an able-bodied athlete, okay, I'm going to buy a pair of basketball sneakers, or I'm going to buy a pair of running shoes. But for the wheelchair athlete, you're talking about a $4,000 racing chair or a $4,000 basketball chair. So what's nice about our program is that we have a variety of sizes of all the different pieces of sporting equipment. So kids can come in and try something new without that great expense. And we also can help families as the kids show more aptitude for a particular sport, or the desire to train more, even outside of the Bennett. There's some grant opportunities out there that we can help direct parents to, so that they can get some individual equipment. But again, sometimes we get a kid that gets a chair at 12. Obviously, they're going to outgrow that chair at 15 sometimes, and then they need another chair. Put in extra money until it's doing. I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah, I think I lost you for a moment, but I think you're back now. Thank you, Gwena. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I was. Yeah,
Um,
now we can hear you. Yep.
so it sounds like it's such a legacy that these athletes are providing for then future athletes to come by leaving their equipment behind. It's such a gift. And I love the idea of having a chair. I don't know, this chair almost has its life of its own where it's helping all these athletes achieve their dreams. It's a really cool idea, and it's crazy. I don't think I realized quite how expensive the equipment was, and yeah, that would be a huge barrier. Um, so with that, one of the things you sort of had mentioned is how that was one of the ways that adaptive sports have changed in the past 3 decades is the equipment has gotten a lot better. What are some other ways that adaptive sports has changed over time?
I think it's just the education and the opportunities that are out there. That there are more and more opportunities. Even like when we first started 30 years ago, we were the only junior wheelchair basketball program. Now there's probably 6 teams on the East Coast or whatever that we can travel and compete against and with.
That's
Um,
great.
so it's the opportunities, which is good, and then it runs into now sometimes the kids actually have to decide which competition they're going to attend because they conflict in schedule sometimes. We need to get the national organizations to kind of work together a little bit better to kind of look at each other's dates and say, okay, let's not put something on the same exact weekend so the kids don't have to make those decisions.
Right, right.
But I think education and just acceptance. I think this Paralympic year is going to really help open up the eyes to a lot of people of what athletes are capable of doing, because they're going to be able to see more of that now that more of it's going to be on TV and stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's also been an accelerating movement across the country with the help of some organizations to get more opportunities in high school so that an athlete can get on their high school track team, swim team, golf team, tennis team. At least in Maryland, is actually a law called Tatiana's Law that she sued to establish that you have to provide an opportunity or give them a chance to try out, you know. But a lot of times what happens is, like, if we have a serious swimmer, most of our kids only come 1 to 2 times a week. So if they're really serious about swimming, we tell them to go join an able-bodied swim team. And then those teams are nowadays are much more open.
Hmm.
And then if you have the opportunity to train educated, we used to have kids on high school track teams, and I would ask them, "What do you do for a workout?" "Oh, 3 laps and 200." It's like, is that a warm up, or so we about volume need to
I know. I think yeah, I love hearing your story and about the is that a warm up or what? But I think I have you back now. I know I'm on
Yeah.
the edge of a thunderstorm, so I'm wondering if this is my end. You can hear like the thunder rumbling.
we probably don't have good internet service. We're actually on vacation at a friend's summer home, so the internet isn't the best here either.
It's the world we live in right now. So that's really interesting in terms of not only Tatiana's law and how clearly she broke a lot of boundaries moving forward. And are you seeing that in other states as well now?
It's become pretty common. The sad thing is it's pretty common, but at the same point, you're not surprised when you find out that they're still banning some kids or barring some kids. I mean, we've been through it so many times that one of the things that happens oftentimes is that the administrators will say something to a kid and say, "If you get on this track," and everyone at the track meet is disqualified. So you should just go. But nowadays, if we had somebody in that situation, we said, get on the track and take some laps. And if they have to shut down the meet, then that'll educate them, you know.
Absolutely. I love it.
You know, but it's much more common, and more and more it's happening more and more states, you know. But again, in some states, it's still like reinventing the wheel, like no one else is doing it, you know.
Wow.
And there's been some unique stories too. That like in Maryland, you can score 4 points, you know, 1 point for each event that you do. And I think it was in Mississippi that one of those points won the state championship for the team, and the wheelchair racer got a point that they won by 1 point, you know. So that's kind of an amazing thing that, you know, and really feel included. You know, when Tatiana originally did it, they weren't going to allow her to score points, but then she argued, you know, for example, some teams don't have a pole vaulter, so they're getting points. Why, you know, so if you don't have a wheelchair racer, I should get a point. And in some states, there are enough athletes that it's not just one school with one athlete. There's multiple schools, multiple athletes. And I see that progressing, you know, not making us obsolete, but that more and more it's included in high schools, then the less need it is for types of programs like ours, until you get to team sports. No school's ever really going to have enough players to have a basketball team or a hockey team or whatever.
Right. So are you finding yourself unexpectedly in the role of advocacy, or was that something that you have always been part of, and it's always been part of the Bennett Institute?
I think we always try to encourage the kids, if there's an opportunity to get involved in their community, to do that. We do have some of our stand-up athletes who play on able-bodied soccer teams or basketball. And they might not be the superstar in those teams, but it's just more opportunity to participate. But then when they come to us and they're participating with other athletes with similar abilities, then they're kind of more on an equal playing field, and they can kind of have a little bit more positive experience. But even playing on the able-bodied team and even being the weakest player on that team can still be a positive experience. I mean, just the socialization. And we just encourage the kids that are older and I can understand that it's just going to help you improve. It's going to increase your training opportunities. And it's going to make you a better athlete when it comes time for you to participate within your classification system within a disabled sporting event.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see the upcoming games. So they start August 24th and run through September 5th. And they're a must see. And we definitely should check out all the local athletes that we expect to see there: Tatiana, Daniel, Ryan, and Josh. So thank you so much to Gwena and Gerry Herman of the Bennett Institute. Thank you both for being here today and taking some time to speak about your experience. Thank you also to the Kennedy Krieger Institute, and thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Make sure that you visit ChesapeakeFamily.com for local information on home, health, and living for today's Maryland parent. This episode will be archived on ChesapeakeFamily.com in both video and podcast format. I'm Janet Jefferson with Chesapeake Family Life. Thanks so much.
Thank you.